When people imagine a food forest, they usually think of lots of fruit trees. So naturally, many beginners start by planting as many trees as they can squeeze into a space. And this is the problem. Trees are the easiest way to accidentally ruin your small food forest. One tree can shade your vegetable beds, stop your berries fruiting, and dominate the whole garden for decades. So in this video, I'll show you how to use the tree layer properly in a small garden, including why I don't think apple trees are always the best choice, how you can eat some tree leaves, how trees can fertilize your garden, and at the end, 7 simple questions that you can ask yourself so that you can choose the exact right tree for your garden. So in a food forest, the tree layer is the main layer at the top, and that is the layer that will be getting the most sun. And if you're not careful, this tree layer can actually block the sun to all the other layers. So a smaller canopy and less trees can actually give you a more productive food forest in the long run, because all the other layers will be able to do more work. Even Robert Hart himself, the pioneer of forest gardening in the UK, himself admitted that he'd planted too many trees in his forest garden, and that actually over the years that had cut the light off to the understories, and many of the understory plants had died off. This hawthorn here shades the guild that is underneath it, but luckily the plants that are under there are all shade loving. So I have things like Good King Henry, Sweet Cicely, rhubarb and blackcurrants. But going along from this, I've left plenty of space between the trees just to ensure that there's plenty of light for all of the other plants there. So in a food forest, the tree layer can provide all sorts of yields. Obviously there's things like fruits and nuts. There's also some varieties of tree where you can eat the leaves. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Also they provide shade so that you can grow some shade loving plants. You have the benefit of habitat for wildlife and also biomass. So if you want to do something like capture more carbon, or you're wanting to create your own firewood source, then trees can provide all of these things for us. But in a small space, you also have to weigh up the fact that trees will take more moisture out of the soil. So if you have a really dry soil and you plant lots of trees, then the things around the trees are going to struggle even more. They also cast shade, so that can be a good thing if you have a really sunny garden and you don't mind having some shady areas. If you already have a shady garden and then you plant loads more trees in it, then you're going to be creating even more shade and the plants underneath will struggle even more. So this may be a controversial opinion, but I don't actually recommend to everybody to plant an apple tree in their garden, and there are a few reasons for this. Number one is that apple trees are everywhere, obviously depending on your climate and the place that you live. Apple trees are one of the most numerous trees around. They can quite often be found by road verges where they've self-seeded from people throwing apple cores out of the window. Quite often people will have large apple trees in their garden and actually leave boxes of fruit out on their doorstep to give away. Community orchards are usually predominantly apple trees, and they're really readily available in the shop. So actually, if you were going to choose one tree, if you only had the choice of one tree to put in your garden, unless apples are absolutely your favourite fruit and you really have a lot of things that you want to make with apples, so you want to ensure you have a really good supply, I would actually argue that maybe don't put an apple in your garden. Why not grow something a little bit more interesting, something a little different and that maybe you can't find readily in the shop? So maybe something like a Szechuan pepper. This one here is Xanthoxylon simulans. This one is self-fertile, so it doesn't need a pollinating partner. And you can see it's absolutely covered in fruit. So this tree is probably about 4 or 5 years old now. There's all sorts of other things you could try, something like a mulberry or a quince or cherries. I find that quite often people get fed up of growing cherries because the birds take them all. But I found that if you use a yellow fruited variety, then the birds don't realise that they're ready and tend to leave them alone, so you get a better crop. So if you really love cherries, why not try a yellow fruited variety? So in a smaller scale food forest, more trees is not always better. So here in this border, here I've got a Japanese plum, and then a bit further along, I've got Szechuan pepper. A bit further along from that, at the back, I've got an Aralia. That will grow quite tall, so that'll be fine at the back. And then behind that, I've got an apple tree. And there did used to be another Szechuan pepper in this border, but I very quickly realised that that was too many trees for this small space, so I had to take that one out. And actually by taking that out, it has really meant that all of the things underneath it, like gooseberries and lemon balm and herbs, have actually done better because they've got a bit more light. And I don't really need 2 Szechuan peppers because this one is absolutely covered in fruit and I've got loads to harvest from that. So you might think at the moment, well, you've got loads of space, you know, there's loads of space in there for more trees, but actually in another 10 years time, these trees are all going to be much bigger. So if I put in more trees now, the shrubs underneath will become less productive over time as they get shaded out. Things like the herbs will really struggle and die out. And a lot of the perennial vegetables that I have in here just won't have enough light to be really productive. So just try and remember that a food forest is all about the stacking of layers. And if you have too much of the top layer, then none of the other layers underneath can do their job properly. So trees don't just feed us, they can feed the garden too. And a great example of those are nitrogen fixing trees. So alder is one that I use quite often. I will plant an alder in larger spaces. I'll plant an alder on the north side of a fruit tree, a few meters away, and I will coppice the alder every few years. And because it's a nitrogen fixing tree, it means that it's actually adding nitrogen to the soil, and particularly when you coppice them and there's a lot of root dieback, that nitrogen gets released into the soil and is available to the other plants. And then if you also chip up the branches as well when you coppice them, then you can use that as a mulch, further adding more nitrogen to the soil. Behind me there is a sea buckthorn, and there's this debate around, you know, what's a tree, what's a shrub. Some people would class sea buckthorn as a shrub, but I think you'll agree it's fairly large. And actually there isn't any botanical definition of what's a tree and what's a shrub. It usually comes down to, does it have a trunk, one trunk, or is it lots of stems coming out from the ground? The one trunk usually being what you would class as a tree, and the multi-branching is what you'd normally class as a shrub. But this sea buckthorn here, it really has one main trunk, and it's all branches up from that, and it's very tall. But this is also a nitrogen fixing plant. So if I grow this amongst my other plants, when I cut the leaves and spread them around, then I'm actually, the tree itself is helping to fertilise the garden and increase the amount of nitrogen that there is in the soil. So the Forestry Commission policy states that they expect a tree to grow over 5 metres, so perhaps that's how they decide the definition between a tree or a shrub. But I think it's quite interesting to think about. And one of my favourite quotes is from David Allen Sibley, and he said, "If you can walk under it, it's a tree, and if you have to walk around it, it's a shrub." And I thought actually that's quite an interesting definition in the context of a food forest, because what we're really interested in is how the plant fits into the layers and the physical space in a food forest. So does it matter if it's defined as a tree but grows like a shrub? You know, so I think in a way that quote gives a more useful definition for us as gardeners trying to grow in this multi-layered way. So here, this sea buckthorn, I can get under this tree, which means that I can plant other things under this. So I've actually got an apple tree technically underneath the canopy of this shrub. So does this definition really matter, or is it more to do with the fact that if you're going to grow something on a trunk, and that means you can plant things underneath, then great, but you would treat that differently to something that grows where you, as they say, where you have to walk round it, where it's more shrubby, because then you're less likely to have room on the ground to plant other things. If you have a really small garden and you really think that you can't fit any fruit trees in at all, then you might want to look into trained fruit trees. So this means something like espalier or cordon fruit trees, which can actually be trained against a wall or a fence. And this is a way that we prune and tie in the branches so that we're just having the tree really within one plane. So rather than sort of being branches that are allowed to go out in whatever direction they like, we train these trees to stay flat against a wall or a fence. You can also train them into something called minarets, and that's almost like where you're making a column of fruit. So you have one main trunk, but all of the branches tend to be pruned so that they never get very wide. So it's sort of a column of fruit. And I've seen that done really successfully in small spaces. So in terms of questions to ask yourself when choosing a tree. So these questions are a tool to help you to make sure you've selected the right tree for your food forest. So ask yourself, can this tree provide something that I can't easily buy? Might be something you're not bothered about, but I think it's worth asking that question anyway. Another question is, how big is this going to grow? And it might be that if it's something like a fruit tree, you might be able to prune it to stay smaller, but not all trees respond well to pruning. So I think it's really worth thinking about how big that tree is going to grow eventually, because they grow faster than you might think. And that depending on how many you're going to plant in the garden, will that actually leave you enough sunlight to the lower layers? Where will the shade fall if I plant this tree? So it might be that you sort of imagine that it's just going to shade directly the ground below it, but because of the way that the sun moves around, then the tree can shade quite a large area depending on where it is, and you don't want it, say, shading out your favourite sunny sit spot, or maybe some annual veg beds that you have where you really need to make sure that they get plenty of sun. Can I train it to be a bit smaller? So maybe you don't want to have an absolutely huge tree, but before you buy it and think, oh, it's fine, I can just prune it, make sure that it actually responds well to pruning, because some trees, that particularly things like tip-bearing apples, if you keep pruning off all of the outside branches, then you won't be getting any fruit. Does it offer multiple yields? So in permaculture, then yeah, it's brilliant if whatever we put in our garden can tick many boxes. So something like this mulberry behind me, it produces fruit, it casts some shade. It's also great value for wildlife because the birds have been spent all day eating all the mulberries off this. And also you can eat mulberry leaves as well. So I mentioned earlier about certain trees you can eat the leaves of as well. And this is usually just the young tender leaves earlier in the year, but things like the linden, lime trees, you can eat the leaves, particularly really nice in sort of sandwiches with other things as well. Things like hawthorn, which you can eat the small leaves early in spring. They have a folk tradition of being called bread and cheese, although they taste absolutely nothing like bread and cheese. But they're really nice sort of springtime snack really early in the year. You can also eat silver birch leaves early in spring, but a word of caution. The first time that I ever tried silver birch leaves, I ate a few and I thought, wow, these are absolutely delicious, so sweet and sugary. And then I realized that the sugary taste was actually from the honeydew on the leaves, which for those of you that don't know, honeydew is basically what aphids excrete onto the leaves. And so after that, it's made me very cautious just to check before I eat any tree leaves that they're not coated in a layer of honeydew. Can it support wildlife? So some trees have more wildlife value than others. Maybe they have flowers that are really important for pollinators early in the year. So something like a Cornus mass has flowers really early in the year, sort of January, February time. So maybe that's something that's really important to you. Or maybe it's that it's an evergreen tree and that provides some kind of cover for all sorts of creatures in the winter. And finally, will I actually use it? And I know this sounds like a really silly question, but if you decide that your one tree is going to be a Szechuan pepper because you think it looks beautiful and it's not something that you can buy quite as easily as something like apples, but you've never actually tried Szechuan pepper, then you might find that you grow it, you wait ages, you get fruit, and then think, oh, actually, this is really not for me. So make sure that whatever you plant, because it's quite a big investment in sort of time and energy and space in a limited garden, make sure it's something that you're actually going to use. So just my final thoughts is that, as I've mentioned before, and I know I keep going on about it, but it's so important, is that we have to really think carefully about the trees that we plant, because the tree layer is not about squeezing in as many trees as possible into our small space, even if we really want to. What is much more valuable is choosing the right trees and spacing them really thoughtfully and carefully. So if you want to support all the hard work I put into creating these videos, then please head over to my Patreon page, where I have created an online community called the Food Forest Circle. And this is not only a great way to support me and what I do, but also is a wonderful space for sharing ideas and knowledge and thoughts and asking questions. And every month we have a live Zoom chat where I explore a topic, and then there's plenty of time for you to ask questions and be part of the conversation. And the next video, we are going to head right underground and talk about the crops that grow in the root zone. So if you don't want to miss out, then make sure you're subscribed.